Have you ever had one of those days where everything is just quiet? Too quiet. You finish your breakfast. The dishes sit in the sink. The phone doesn't ring. The news plays in the background, but it doesn't really feel like company. You look out the window, maybe watch a neighbor walk their dog and think, when did things start to feel so far away? If that sounds familiar, I want to tell you something important. You are not alone in feeling lonely. Not even a little. Loneliness after 60 is far more common than people realize, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're not strong or that you haven't built a full, rich life. It just means the rhythm of your days has shifted, and now it's time to shift with it. Because the truth is, we all need connection. Not just casual conversation, but real, nourishing, heartful connection. And after 60, it's not always as easy to come by as it once was. Retirement changes your routine. Kids grow up and get busy, friends move away or become harder to reach. And sometimes, even when you're surrounded by people, it still feels like no one really sees you. That's where this conversation comes in. Today, I want to gently walk with you through a few connection habits. Simple things that can make a real difference. They're not complicated. You don't have to be tech-savvy or outgoing or even particularly social. You just need a willingness to try. And maybe a little hope that things can feel better. Let's start with something beautifully simple. Making space for daily check-ins. Not just with others, but with yourself. When we feel lonely, it's easy to go numb. We move through the day on autopilot, coffee, TV, a walk around the block, dinner, bed. But that quiet ache in the chest doesn't go away. It just sits there, waiting. So one of the most powerful things you can do is bring intention back into your day. Start with a morning moment. Sit down, even just for 5 minutes, and ask yourself, how am I feeling today? What do I need? You can write it in a journal, say it out loud, or just sit with the question. Giving yourself that check-in does something powerful. It reconnects you to you. And once you're more connected with yourself, it becomes easier to connect with others from a real place. Not from loneliness, but from awareness. One woman I spoke to, her name was Marlene, told me she started doing tea time with herself every afternoon. No phone, no TV, just a cup of tea, some quiet music, and a moment to breathe and check in. And she said, I didn't even realize how much I missed my own company. That's the first step. The second habit that makes a real difference is reaching out without expectation. One of the hardest things about loneliness is that it convinces us we're bothering people. That if we call someone, text someone, invite someone for coffee, we're being a burden. But the truth is, most people are also waiting to hear from someone. They just don't say it. So here's a little shift that can open big doors. Send a note, a message, or a call. Not to get something, but to give something. A memory, a compliment, a thought of you today and smiled. That kind of connection doesn't just brighten their day. It reminds you that you still have things to offer. Your presence, your voice, your humor, your stories. They matter more than you think. There's a man in Florida, I'll call him Joe, who told me he sends postcards. Old-fashioned, handwritten postcards. He finds funny ones at a thrift shop, writes a note, and sends them to his nieces, his old co-workers, and even a former neighbor who moved to Arizona. He said he doesn't expect a reply, but almost every time he gets one. A message, a call, a laugh. Sometimes, even a visit. That's what happens when you reach out gently, with no pressure. Just presence. The third connection habit is a little less obvious, but incredibly powerful. It's creating shared rituals. These don't have to be big or ceremonial. A shared ritual is just something you and someone else can do together, over and over, in a way that creates rhythm and meaning. It could be calling your sister every Sunday at 5 p.m. for tea. It could be sending a silly photo to your grandson every Monday morning. It could be meeting a neighbor at the mailbox and walking once around the block together, even if it's only on Wednesdays. What makes it special is the consistency, the predictability, the way it says, "This moment belongs to us." Shared rituals remind us that we still belong, and belonging is what keeps loneliness from settling too deep. One woman in Oregon told me she started doing a reading hour on Zoom with her cousin across the country. They pick a book, read separately for the first 20 minutes, and then talk about a chapter or two. Once a week, nothing fancy. But she said it gives her something to look forward to all week long. That's what these habits do. They give your days color again. They turn time into connection. They make space for you to feel seen. And now that we've looked at how reconnecting with yourself, reaching out gently, and building small rituals can open your world again. Now that we've looked at how reconnecting with yourself, reaching out gently, and building small rituals can open your world again, let's take that foundation and go just a little deeper. Because the next two habits are about building meaningful connection. The kind that doesn't just pass time, but fills you up. One of the most powerful and healing habits is something that might surprise you: offering support to someone else, even in a small way. We often think that when we feel lonely, we're the ones who need to be helped or fixed. But connection works both ways. And sometimes, the most energizing thing you can do for yourself is to show up for someone else. Not as a hero, not with grand gestures, but simply as someone who listens, who checks in, who notices. You'd be amazed how many people, especially other seniors, are feeling exactly what you're feeling, but don't know how to talk about it. Maybe it's someone in your building, someone you nod to at church but never really speak with, someone who always sits alone at the park, feeding the birds. And what happens when you take the first step? When you say, "Hey, I've noticed we're both here a lot. Want to walk a lap together sometime?" Or, "Would you like to come over for coffee next week?" Nothing fancy, just good company. You're not just helping them. You're anchoring yourself in their life too. Helping others reminds us that we still matter, that we still belong in the human web of giving and receiving. One man told me he started volunteering at his local library just one afternoon a week. Nothing major, just helping shelve books and smile at visitors. But he said it made him feel plugged in again. He even met two new friends, both in their 70s, who now meet for pie every Friday. That's how small steps become real connection. And speaking of connection, let's talk about the fifth habit: getting curious about something new with someone else. Loneliness can make the world feel smaller. The same rooms, the same schedule, the same memories playing on repeat. But curiosity? Curiosity expands things, and shared curiosity creates real, lasting bonds. You don't need to become an expert. You don't need to start a new hobby on your own. You just need to say, "I wonder if," and invite someone along for the wondering. I wonder if we could learn to cook one new dish a week together. I wonder if there's a class on local history at the library. I wonder if that cafe hosts music nights. I wonder if my neighbor would enjoy watching old movies with me once a month. Curiosity isn't about perfection. It's about possibility, about play, about discovering something alongside another human being. I once met a woman, Janice, 68, who had never touched a paintbrush in her life. But she and a friend from her walking group decided to take a watercolors class at the local rec center. Janice said they spent more time laughing than painting. But now, every Tuesday, they have a standing art night where they chat, paint, and share stories. It's not about the art. It's about the time, the togetherness, the joy. When you let your mind stretch a little beyond the routine and invite someone else to stretch with you, you tap into something ancient and vital. Shared discovery. And that discovery doesn't just lighten the weight of loneliness. It builds new bridges. Quiet ones. Steady ones. Now, I know that starting something new, especially when you're feeling a bit isolated, can feel scary, vulnerable, like stepping out without knowing if anyone will reach back. But you don't have to start big. You just have to start. Maybe it's saying hello to someone a little longer than usual. Maybe it's writing a note to someone who hasn't heard from you in a while. Maybe it's calling the senior center to ask about one event. Just one. Loneliness wants you to stay still. Connection asks you to take one step forward. And that step, no matter how small, can be the beginning of something healing, something human, something real. You don't need a crowd. You don't need dozens of friends. Sometimes one strong, kind, mutual bond is enough to remind you that you're still part of something bigger. That your story is still unfolding. That your presence still matters. Because it does. And the fact that you're even here, watching this, listening, open to change, that tells me there's already a spark in you that wants more connection, more joy, more life. And that spark, it's enough. That spark is enough. And when you begin to nurture it, even just a little, it grows. Slowly, steadily, like a warm light in the corner of a room you'd almost forgotten was there. Let's take a breath together. You've just explored 5 habits that aren't flashy or overwhelming, but are full of quiet power. They don't ask you to become someone else. They just invite you to return to yourself with others by your side. Maybe you're still wondering, will this actually make a difference for me? And if so, that's okay. Doubt often walks alongside loneliness. But let me offer you this. Small, consistent acts of connection can shift the shape of your days. Not all at once, and not like magic, but with real, noticeable warmth. Let's gently reflect on what these 5 habits are truly about. They're not about being busy. They're not about filling time with noise or distractions. They're about creating moments of presence, of reaching inward and outward equally, of remembering that just because the world feels quieter doesn't mean you've disappeared from it. You still have so much to give. Your stories, your laughter, your attention, your presence at a table, in a room, on a walk, at a call. That's where connection begins, not in fixing what's wrong with loneliness, but in honoring your very human need to be seen, heard, and felt by someone else. And remember, these habits aren't a checklist, they're tools. A toolbox you can come back to anytime. On your good days, on your slow ones, on the mornings you feel okay, and especially on the evenings you don't. Check in with yourself. Reach out with kindness. Create small rituals. Offer quiet support. Stay curious together. Even one of these is enough to open a window, to let air and light back in. I've heard from many people in this season of life who believed they were too old to start again, too stuck, too invisible. And then they tried something small. A neighborly wave that turned into a weekly walk, a journal entry that turned into a handwritten letter, a craft class that turned into a coffee group. They didn't need to be rescued, they just needed to be reminded. They were still here. And so are you. I want to thank you for spending this time with me. Really. Whether you're watching this late at night with a blanket on your lap or listening while you make tea in the afternoon, I'm honored to be with you in this moment. If something we talked about today resonated with you, even just one habit or idea, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which habit you're curious about trying. And your story might be the gentle nudge someone else needs to feel a little less alone, too. If this video helped you in any way, consider liking it. It helps more people find this message, and I hope that's something we can spread together. And if you'd like more videos like this, built for this exact season of life, go ahead and subscribe. I make each one with people like you in mind. You matter here. You matter everywhere. And if today felt lonely, just know that tomorrow can be different. Even if all that changes is a single hello, a shared laugh, or the sound of your own voice saying, "I'm still here, and I'm ready to connect again." Here's to your strength, your kindness, your place in this world. Here's to connection, on your terms, in your time, and with all the heart you already have.